I had worked incredibly hard to build a life that looked unremarkable from the outside, and I was proud of every single boring detail of it. A steady job as a paralegal at a mid-sized firm in Charlotte, a clean one-bedroom apartment I could actually afford, a credit score I had nursed from 580 to 764 over 6 years of discipline, sacrifice, and saying no to things I wanted so I could build something I needed. I was 31 years old, and for the first time in my adult life, I felt like I was standing on solid ground. I remember the exact morning everything changed. A Tuesday in March, overcast and cold enough that I had worn my heavier coat. I was at my desk when my phone buzzed with a call from a number I didn't recognize, a 704 area code. I almost let it go to voicemail. I wish I had, because at least then I would have had a few more hours of not knowing. The woman on the other end of the line introduced herself as a representative from the Small Business Administration Loan Servicing Department. She asked me to confirm my name, my social security number, my date of birth. I confirmed all three. Then she told me that my account was 90 days past due and that the outstanding balance on my SBA 7A business loan was $438,000. I said, "I'm sorry, can you repeat that?" She did. $438,000. Past due 90 days. Referred to collections. "There has to be a mistake," I told her. "I don't have a business loan. I have never applied for a business loan. I don't own a business." There was a pause on her end. Then, "Miss Calloway, we have loan documents, a signed personal guarantee, formation documents for an LLC registered in your name in the state of North Carolina, and 2 years of tax returns filed under your social security number showing business income from that entity." The room tilted. I sat very still, gripping the edge of my desk with my free hand, and I felt something cold move through my chest that had nothing to do with the weather outside. "What is the name of the LLC?" I asked. She told me, "Calloway Creative Solutions, LLC." I had never heard of it in my life. "Who?" I said, and my voice came out smaller than I intended. "Who submitted the application?" She said she couldn't share that information over the phone without a formal fraud inquiry being opened. She gave me a case number and a different phone number to call, and suggested I also contact the 3 major credit bureaus immediately. She was professional and kind about it, which somehow made it worse. She had clearly done this before. She knew what this call was going to do to my day, my week, my year. I hung up and sat at my desk for 4 minutes without moving. I know it was 4 minutes because I watched the clock on my computer screen. Then I pulled up my credit report. The LLC had been opened 26 months ago. There were 2 SBA loans, a business line of credit through a regional bank in Raleigh, and a personal credit card opened in my name that I had never seen before. Combined, the total debt load attached to my social security number that I had nothing to do with was $462,000. 62% of it was past due. I am going to ask you something, and I want you to think about it honestly. If you found out right now that someone had spent 2 years quietly dismantling your financial life using your name, your credit, your identity, someone who knew your birthday, your mother's maiden name, your childhood address, every piece of personal information a bank would ask for, how long would it take you to figure out who had done it? It took me 11 minutes. My brother, Derek, was 35 years old and had been chasing the idea of running his own business for as long as I could remember, not the reality of it. The idea. He had pitched my father on a landscaping company when he was 22, a food truck at 25, a clothing brand at 28, a photography studio at 30. My father had funded 2 of those attempts. Both had collapsed within 18 months. Derek was charming and creative and genuinely talented at generating enthusiasm for things that didn't exist yet, and genuinely terrible at the part where you had to show up every day and do the work. He knew everything about me. We had grown up in the same house. He had watched me build my credit score point by point, had listened to me explain why I wouldn't co-sign a loan for him 3 years ago, had sat across from me at Thanksgiving dinner while I talked about my goals. He had all my information. He had watched me become exactly the kind of credit profile that could get approved for an SBA loan. I drove to my parents' house that evening. I didn't call ahead. I had spent the afternoon on the phone with the SBA fraud department, the FTC, the 3 credit bureaus, and an attorney at my firm who specialized in financial fraud. I had filed the initial fraud report. I had frozen all 3 of my credit files. I had documentation, I had a folder. Derek was there when I arrived, which told me my mother had called him the moment I pulled into the driveway. He was sitting at the kitchen table with a coffee mug in both hands and the expression of a man who had been rehearsing something. "Claire," he said. "Don't," I said. I set the folder on the table between us. Calloway Creative Solutions, LLC. Registered March of 2 years ago. SBA loan, business line of credit, personal guarantee, 2 years of fraudulent tax filings under my social security number. Do you want to tell me which part I have wrong? My mother stood at the sink with her back to me. My father was in the doorway to the living room, arms crossed, not quite in the room. Derek looked at the folder, and then he looked at me, and his face did the thing it always did when he was caught, that slow collapse from performance into something smaller. "I was going to pay it back," he said. "The business was supposed to—" "Stop." I pulled out the chair across from him and sat down. "I am not asking you why. I am telling you what happens next. I have already filed fraud reports with the SBA, the FTC, and all 3 credit bureaus. My attorney has advised me that what you did constitutes federal wire fraud, identity theft, and fraudulent loan application. Tomorrow morning I am filing a police report." My mother turned around from the sink. "Claire, that is your brother. I know who he is. You would send your own brother to prison over money? I want you to think about that question for a second. Really sit with it. Over money. As though Derek had borrowed $20 and forgotten to pay me back. As though $462,000 in fraudulent debt attached to my name was the same category of thing as forgetting to Venmo someone back for dinner. He committed a federal crime using my identity," I said. "That is not something I did to him. That is something he did to me." My father walked into the kitchen then, fully, and pulled out a chair. He sat down with the gravity of a man about to mediate something, and I felt a twist of something old and tired move through me, because I had seen him sit down like that my entire life. He had always been the one who smoothed things over. He had always been the one who found the middle ground. He was very good at making both sides feel heard while quietly steering things toward whatever outcome preserved the peace. "There has to be a way to handle this privately," he said, "without involving the courts. Derek, if you came up with a repayment plan—" "Dad." I kept my voice level. "The SBA has already been notified. The fraud case is already open. This is not something that gets handled privately at the kitchen table, and I need you to understand something." I looked at him directly. "I have spent 6 years building my financial life. 6 years. My credit score is going to take years to recover from this if it fully recovers. I cannot buy a home. I cannot get a car loan. I cannot do anything that requires a credit check until this is resolved, and that process takes a long time. This is not a misunderstanding. This is not a mistake. He chose to do this." Derek hadn't said anything else. He was looking at the folder. "There were 2 adults who had to approve those loan documents," my father said. "Someone at the bank." "Who Derek knows," I said. "Marcus Chen, who Derek went to high school with and who was a loan officer at Regional First until 3 months ago when he was quietly let go. Which is in the folder, Dad. All of it is in the folder. The silence in that kitchen was the kind that has weight." My mother sat down. She didn't look at me. She looked at Derek, and her expression was not the expression of a woman watching her son face consequences. It was the expression of a woman calculating how to protect him from them. "We can refinance the house," she said. "If we took out a home equity loan—" "Mom." I stood up. "No, stop. I love you, but I need you to hear me say this once, clearly, and then I am going to leave. I did not do anything wrong. I worked for every single thing I have. I am the victim in this situation. And if either of you take out loans to cover what Derek stole, that is your choice, but it will not change what I have already filed. It will not close the fraud case. It will not undo what he did. The only thing it will do is teach him that there are no consequences for taking things that belong to other people." I picked up my folder. I walked to the door. I paused with my hand on the frame. "I hope," I said, "that when you're both thinking this over tonight, you ask yourself one question. If it had been your identity, your credit, your financial future, would you expect me to forgive it quietly?" Neither of them answered. I drove home and I cried for about 45 minutes and then I stopped, because I had a lot of work to do. The next several months were, without exaggeration, some of the hardest of my life. I want to be honest about that. Because there is a version of this kind of story where the hero files a police report and 2 weeks later everything is resolved and they ride off into the sunset. That is not what identity theft actually looks like. Identity theft, especially the kind involving fraudulent business entities and tax filings, looks like a second full-time job that you didn't ask for and cannot quit. I was on the phone with the IRS for the better part of 3 months correcting 2 years of fraudulent returns filed under my SSN. I submitted form after form to the SBA fraud office. I worked with my attorney to build the criminal case documentation. I sent certified letters to the regional bank, to the credit bureaus, to the collections agency that had already been assigned the past due loan accounts. Every single institution required different documentation. Every single one had a different timeline, a different process, a different person I needed to speak to who was never the person I had spoken to before. My credit score, which I had built to 764, dropped to 510 within 60 days of the fraud discovery. I knew it was going to happen. I had been warned. It still felt like watching something I had grown from a seed get ripped out of the ground. I had one conversation with Derek during this period. He called me 6 weeks after the kitchen confrontation, and I picked up because I was still hoping, even then, that he would say something that would make the situation make more sense. He told me he had hired an attorney. He told me that his attorney thought the case might be dismissible on a technicality because of how the co-signatory documentation had been processed. He told me that he hoped I would consider, for the sake of the family, stepping back from the criminal complaint. I listened to all of it. Then I said, "Derek, you used my social security number to take out nearly $500,000 in loans. The business failed. You didn't pay back a cent, and you are calling me to ask me to step back from the complaint. Do you understand how that sounds?" He said the family was suffering. He said our mother was not sleeping. He said our father's blood pressure was up. I said, "I haven't slept well in 6 weeks. My blood pressure is probably not great either." He hung up. My Aunt Dana called me 2 days later. My father's sister, who lived in Greensboro and drove up for every major family event and had always been, in my memory, the voice of reason in our family. She had a gift for presenting herself as the neutral party while very gently nudging everyone toward the outcome that made the most people comfortable. "I understand you're hurting," she said. "And what Derek did was wrong. Nobody is saying it wasn't wrong. And yet," I said, "and yet the family needs to find a way through this together. Your mother is beside herself. Your father—" "Aunt Dana," I said, "I have a question for you. A genuine one. Of course. If you're truly neutral in this situation, if you truly believe Derek was wrong and that I have every right to protect myself legally, are you offering to contribute to my attorney fees? To help me cover the gap in my finances while I fight this? Or are you calling to ask me to make it easier for Derek?" A long pause. "I thought so," I said. "I love you, but I'm not going to discuss this anymore. I want you to think about the Aunt Danas in your life. The ones who preach about family sticking together but whose advice always, somehow, requires the person who was wronged to absorb the cost of keeping the peace. The ones who talk about forgiveness as though it's a gift you owe the person who hurt you, while they themselves contribute nothing but pressure." The criminal investigation moved slowly, the way these things do. The DA's office took 4 months to formally charge Derek with identity theft, wire fraud, and fraudulent loan application. Marcus Chen, the former bank loan officer, was charged separately. Derek's attorney did attempt the technicality argument. It did not work. The civil case with the SBA took longer. I had filed as a victim of fraud, and my attorney had built what I believe was a strong case, but these institutions move on their own schedule regardless of how urgent the situation feels to the person living inside it. I want to be clear about something that most stories like this gloss over. My credit was not restored in a few phone calls and a few weeks. The fraudulent accounts stayed on my credit report for 14 months before the last one was formally removed. My score did not return to where it had been for almost 2 years. I could not qualify for a mortgage during that entire period. I watched 2 apartments I wanted slip away because landlords ran credit checks. I paid higher interest rates on the one new credit card I opened for rebuilding purposes. None of this gets wrapped up quickly. Anyone who tells you otherwise has never been through it. My father called me 8 months after the initial confrontation. He called on a Sunday afternoon, which was unusual enough that I answered with some caution. He was quiet for a moment at the start of the call, and I recognized that particular quiet. It was the sound of a man choosing his words carefully because he knew the conversation was overdue. He said, "I have been thinking about what you said that night, about what I would have done if it had been my identity." I didn't say anything. I let him continue. "I don't know that I handled it the right way," he said. "When you came to us, I kept thinking about how to protect everyone, and I think I forgot that one of the people who needed protecting was you." It was not a complete apology. It didn't undo the months of distance and silence and the feeling of standing in my parents' kitchen and realizing that my father's instinct was to negotiate rather than to stand beside me. But it was something real. I could hear that it cost him something to say. I told him I appreciated it. I told him I needed more time. I meant both things. My mother and I didn't speak for almost a year. I am not going to dramatize that or explain it more than it needs to be explained. She made her priorities clear that night in the kitchen, and I respected her enough not to pretend she hadn't. When we eventually did speak, at my cousin's wedding, we were polite. We are still polite. Some things change the shape of a relationship permanently, and I have learned that acknowledging that is not bitterness, it is just accuracy. Derek pleaded guilty to 2 counts of identity theft and 1 count of wire fraud, 14 months after I filed the police report. He received 3 years of probation, was ordered to pay restitution, and lost his business license in North Carolina. His attorney had argued for a lighter outcome. The judge noted that the crime had been sustained, deliberate, and had caused significant documented harm to the victim. I was in the courtroom. Derek looked at me once, as they were wrapping up the hearing. I had been preparing for that moment in my mind for a long time, running through all the things his expression might do and what I would feel when I saw it. What I actually felt, standing there, was quieter than I expected. Not satisfaction exactly. Something more like resolution. Like a door that had been swinging on a broken hinge for a long time had finally, fully closed. I want to tell you about the month after the conviction, because I think it is the part of the story that matters most to me now. My credit score crossed 700 again on a Wednesday morning. I checked it on my phone before I even got out of bed. I had been watching the number inch upward for so long that I half expected to feel nothing when it finally crossed that threshold. Instead, I sat there in the early morning light and felt something loosen in my chest that I hadn't realized had been clenched. 6 weeks later, I got pre-approved for a mortgage. I had an attorney, a good one, who had walked with me through every step of a process that was complicated and slow and expensive and required me, repeatedly, to explain my situation to people who were sometimes patient and sometimes weren't. I had colleagues at my firm who had helped me navigate documentation I wouldn't have known to ask for on my own. I had a therapist I had started seeing about 4 months into the ordeal, because I had realized that what my brother had done was not just a financial crime. It was a particular kind of violation, the kind that makes you review every close relationship you have and ask yourself who else might be looking at you and seeing something they could take. I had not collapsed. I had not given up the complaint to keep the peace. I had not absorbed the cost of someone else's choices and called it forgiveness. And I had arrived, 2 years and 3 months after a woman from the SBA called me on a Tuesday morning and changed everything, at a place that was in almost every measurable way better than where I had been before. Not because the experience was worth it. It wasn't. Nobody's 2 lost years are worth it. But because I had found out, in the way you only find out when something genuinely tests you, what I was actually made of. I made an offer on a house the following spring. 3 bedrooms, a small backyard, a neighborhood I had liked for years and always assumed was slightly out of reach. My mortgage application came back approved at a rate that reflected, finally, a credit profile that looked like me again. I sat in the car outside the house the day the offer was accepted, parked at the curb, looking at the front door. My phone had 17 unread messages from people who were happy for me. My father was one of them. I thought about the morning I had built this credit score from 580. I thought about 6 years of saying no to things, of choosing the longer road, of building something careful and slow. I thought about the 11 minutes it had taken me to know who had taken it. And then I thought about the fact that I still had it. Not because no one had tried to destroy it, but because when someone did, I had not quietly let them. If you are going through something like this right now, a number on a screen that you don't recognize, a call from an institution about an account you never opened, The slow realization that someone close to you has been helping themselves to something that was yours. I want you to hear something clearly. File the report. Freeze your credit today, all 3 bureaus, before you do anything else. Find an attorney, even just for a consultation. Document everything. Keep every letter, every email, every case number, every name of every person you speak to. And do not let anyone, not your mother, not your aunt, not your father, not anyone who loves the person who hurt you more than they love the idea of protecting you, convince you that absorbing this quietly is the same thing as being a good person. Protecting yourself is not betrayal. Letting someone face the consequences of what they chose to do to you is not cruelty. You did not create this situation. You are not responsible for managing everyone else's feelings about how you respond to it. My name is Calloway. I am 33 years old. I am a paralegal in Charlotte, North Carolina. I have a credit score of 791 and a mortgage on a house with a small backyard, and I built every single number in that sentence myself. Nobody gets to take that from me. Not again.